Let's go again. Hello, this is the major project for Intro to Psychology. I'm doing it over how development and education can affect your personality. I'm Jay Sanders, and I just got kids to bed, so I'm tired. Forgive me. So, the project's over developmental education and how it affects your personality. How what you go through in life is eventually going to add thoughts and ideas that make you, how they affect your personality. Introduction thesis. This presentation delves into interplay between the critical development stages and personality formation, examining how experiences during childhood, adolescence, and adulthood shape individual interactions and decision-making throughout life. How in short will we go through during key stages of the mind development affect the brain long term. Mostly for this, I'll be using Erik Erikson's theory of psychological development with the ages and the core lessons I learned during them. In this presentation, I will be using different medias as examples, such as my two favorites, Arcane and Supernatural, something more recent and something older. Lifespan development. Lifespan development is a study and theories of how humans change and grow from conception to death, spanning from prenatal stage to late adulthood and ultimately to the end of life. Developmental psychologists specialize in this field of psychology, viewing development as a lifelong process that can be scientifically studied across three developmental domains: physical, cognitive, and psychosocial. Many great philosophers and psychologists have significantly contributed in the research in this developmental psychology. For what we learned from Luhmann, there is Jean Piaget, Mary Ainsworth, Erik Erikson, Lawrence Kohlberg, and others. Very influential theories include cellular clock theory, stages of death and dying, Kohlberg's theory of moral development, the strange situation experiment, and Piaget's 4 stages of cognitive development, along with others, of course. So how does these theories and these people tie into personality development? Lifespan development affects personality by shaping how people think, feel, and act at different stages of life. As we grow, both our experiences and the changes in our bodies and brains influence who we become and how we act in life. Our funny little minds. We as humans are impressionable beings, and as we go through experiences or learn new things, we develop habits that can follow us through adulthood and influence the way we live and the way we act. Now, whether it be trauma or just habits, good or bad, or what we see and feel, we learn. For this presentation, we will focus on Erik Erikson's elevated theories of viewed psychosocial, the psychosocial development. Psychosocial development, the Erikson's theory emphasizes social and emotional growth via major life obstacles over 8 stages. Similar to Jean Piaget's theories on cognitive development, but instead of 4 stages, it's 8. It's more in depth and doesn't just give a broad estimate, which has both its benefits and drawbacks. The 8 stages of psychosocial development. Erikson. Trust versus mistrust. Birth to 1 year. Infants learn to trust caregivers to meet their basic needs, such as feeding them, changing their diapers, playing with them, emotional responses, and talking to them and playing with them. Basically connection. Who's in their life, who they see and know, while they're developing their senses of taste, smell, hearing, all that. Who they can rely on as they are getting skills and who's reliable. Consistent care fosters trust, while inconsistent care leads to mistrust. 2. Autonomy versus shame and doubt. This is from the stages of 1 year to 3 years. Toddler stages. Or ages. Toddlers develop into independence by exploring and making choices. Encouragement fosters autonomy, while over-criticism leads to doubt. So, letting the toddler learn to walk and crawl by itself, talk and speak without too much nudging and criticism will lead to them being very confident in their own abilities, while constantly saying, no, do this, or hey, we need to do this, or don't do that, will lead to them having shame and doubt in themselves. Like, oh, I'm not supposed to do this, or should I do this? It's basically developing in their tiny little minds a complex, but not the fun ones where you think you're good of yourself. It's the ones where you doubt yourself. Initiative versus guilt. This is the third stage. This goes 3 to 6 years. So when your kids are starting to go to school or preschool, depends on when you put them in, daycares, all that. Children begin to assert control through play and social interactions. Support for their initiative builds confidence, while criticism may result in guilt. So during this stage, when kids are starting to play with other kids and not isolated to their parents or just family members, it's that time to branch out. And the more they do so, the better, because they build confidence in themselves to talk and speak. And restriction of this can lead to social anxiety later in life if continued, and doubt in going forth and speaking with people. So codependency on the people they know instead of branching out. And this can be very important if you have a kid who's just now going to preschool. If you shelter them, it'll be harder for them to keep going in life. Because if they're constantly sheltered by their parents, they don't want to branch out. They're not going to want to go explore the world and get out there. So you have to give that step back so they can feel confident in their own abilities and assess the situations and go explore on their own. 4. Industry versus inferiority. I'm trying. It's 11 o'clock at night. This is from 6 to 12. So around this age, you're getting from preschool, elementary to middle school. Children work to develop skills and achieve goals. So this is where they are actually learning. And instead of just focusing on the social interaction, they're now building skills of math, science, English, history, repetitive skills they can use later in life. Or stuff like the arts and music. Success leads to a sense of competence, while repeated failures can create feelings of inferiority. So, the more they succeed in school, the better. The more they fail over and over again could lead to inferiority and feeling doubt in oneself. A lot of doubt and shame and guilt in these young stages. Number 5. Identity versus role confusion. This is 12 to 18-year-olds, so think later middle school, high schooler, when you're starting to branch out, and it's time for you to really step into a role of adulthood, or beginning of adulthood and beginning of teenager, where now what you do has consequences and actions, and your actions have consequences, and who you are and who you're going to be in life. This is where you start thinking about your future and all the prospects of it. Adolescents explore personal identities, beliefs, and goals. Success in exploring your identity without backlash and having support leads to a strong sense of self, while failures of rejection and backlash leads to confusion about one's role. So supporting the kid in what they want to do, but still relatively supporting the kid and fostering their growth and who they want to be and who they are going to be leads to confidence and a strong sense of who they are. It's just very important. While failure can lead to self-doubt and can get very personal and very big issues later, like a personality disorder, like BPD. Number 6. Intimacy versus isolation, 20s to 40s. So this is young adults who might be in the dating stream when romance gets really heavy, or to marriage, think in this stage you're getting 20, you're in college, and you're going through life and work, and now it's dating and marriage, where you're really trying to find the one, or the ones, whatever you prefer. Young adults seek deep relationships. So this could be for friends, romance, platonic, non-platonic, whatever you vibe with. Success in these relationships fosters intimacy, while failure may lead to isolation. So the more you are intimate and open and you can find these relationships with people, romantic or platonic, the better. The more you can connect and find connection, the better you are. But failing in these and feeling rejected can lead to self-isolation, which could lead to depression and more. Number 7, generativity versus stagnation, 40s to 60s. So, midlife crisis era, fun times. Adults focus on contributing to society for your work, family, or community. So by this time, we are assuming you have a family, you are, and I'm using you as an example, whoever's watching. You have a family, you have kids, you have a job you've been working at, and the success in that, in having a great connection with your family, your wife and kids, or your husband and kids, and great job at work, you get the raises, you get the promotions, just a good social circle. What you're contributing for society, for whatever it means to you, and the feeling useful leads to, well, feeling useful. But not doing anything and feeling you're stuck and there's no moving forward leads to stagnation. It feels to being stuck. Like you are doing nothing of success, which could be detrimental and again cause depression, for example. And number 8, final and last, before you hit the rock or the bottom or the pit or whatever you want to go with. Integrity versus despair, 60s and beyond. Older adults reflect on their lives. So this is the point where you have went through 8 stages. And now you look back at it, from kid to now. And you take in all your success and failures and you feel, is it fulfilling? Did you do what you needed? Do you feel relief? Do you feel great? Are you satisfied with life? And that's where it gets integrity or despair. And it's either you feel like you've been a person, you've been a member of society, you've been amazing. And everything in your life, with even the falls and the doubts and all that junk, was amazing. That you did something. And that's good. That's a winning lottery ticket. That's the integrity. Or there's regret, and you feel like you missed out on opportunities. And you feel like you could have done this in that life. That's the 8th stage. It's reflection. And it's, in this project, the least important stage, because hopefully by now, your personality's developed enough. But it's still Erik Erikson's theory, so. It is very important, but by now, I think you would know your personality. If not, it's always changing, so feels important to add. Application, the fun part. Now, all those things I listed before and talked about, they're really just bullet points. They're a basis idea. So how do we apply them? How do we actually take these 8 stages and apply them to a person? An example. How these empty words with just a definition actually get meat on their bones. We're using 2 characters. First, I'll start with someone very popular right now from the Arcane. Jinx. For background, Powder is a young girl who lives in the Undercity, a poor area of Zaun, a rich area. It's 2 sections. You have Zaun, and then you have the Undercity. High-class society, the 1%, but not in this society. It's like the 69% that foster. And then you have the 41% of drugs and poor life quality. It's very important for what I'm about to get into. She lives in, now, Powder, she lives in the Undercity. She lives where it's not great. Her life isn't the easiest. When young, her and her sister Vi lost their mother to Zon, enforcers who killed their parents because poor and executing. Getting out the weak, the yucky, the gross. Real classism. And they were adopted by a family friend of their mother named Vander. Now, Vander often tries to be a support system for the girls, but he's not always able to. Because, again, these two have lost their mother. They're living in a very run-down part of the city underground. And he can't supply everything they need, but he's trying to. So, with what he can do, there's also what the girls have to do. And the girls, with their friends or siblings, also adopted or just run with the family, they steal and they run up into the Zon and try and make a quick buck to survive. Well, Powder is always left out. And this, because when she is there, she messes up stuff. She's a Jinx. And eventually she gets frustrated with this. You know, she's lived her whole life. She's trying to be part of the group, but she keeps getting kicked out. And she wants to prove herself. So, one mission, she tries to sneak up with her sister Vi and be part of the group. To be part of something. And she's very inventive, so she makes an invention that'll try, stop the enforcers of Zon while they go steal, because they get caught. One on their mission. But it goes horribly wrong. This invention she makes kills everyone. Yeah. Trauma. It goes horribly wrong and kills everyone except her sister, who in the heat of grief of just losing everyone in their family for a second time, ditches Powder, and the Zon police force arrests Vi as suspect, and then keep her in prison for the next 7 years, under no warrant or trial. Classism at its finest. Powder Bear is now left alone screaming for help in the rubble of her dead family. Bear with me. It is found by Silco, essentially a mob boss of Zon, and is adopted as he sees potential in her and feels connected to her through loss. He renames her as her curse, Jinx. Powder turns into Jinx. Very big transition for her, after just losing everyone in her family. Jinx from there is isolated and becomes a part of the family business with Silco. And because her environment normalizes due to poverty and oppression from Zon, she is manipulated to believe this behavior of a mob and stealing and corrupting and drugging people is fine. Because that's what's going on around her. So she has no outlet or support system to say, this isn't fine, and bring her out of it. So she's heavily manipulated, she's heavily isolated. And all she sees is this is fine. Because here, she has a support system, and her Jinx is praised. And her new father, Silco, who is also traumatized, beyond compare, feeds into her mental illness, her grief, and thoughts of being a curse from the death of her whole family, previous. And instead of giving her a form of coping, feeding into this mental illness gives her a form of schizophrenia, making her insane and heavily dependent on him. Bad conditions all over. From that short, very brief analysis, you can see some very troubling things in her past. But how does this affect her and her personality? Well, since she's in this horrible environment, and all her attempts of getting actual help are brushed off and just fed into, well, it's fine. She develops with a very manic, dangerous, and bubbly personality, which I can only describe as Regina George in a way, and Joker if they had a baby and then let it free in a warehouse to make inventions. just freed it. But because of her family and death everywhere, of two families, she has a need to please. She's seeking approval from the figures who aren't healthy, just for a slightest bit of acknowledgement that she's not cursed and doomed by the narrative. She's self-destructive when she fails and manic. Her attachment to her father, Silco, leads her to follow the blind, aka him, and let herself be weaponized and further damage out of his love and her need for it. So, her personality is dependent, manic, very joking, laughing off the trauma, and dangerous. She's a danger to herself because she follows the blind and can't get actual help. Now, with that said, what psychosocial development applies to Jinx? Industry versus inferiority. As Powder, Jinx in her youth, she constantly seeks to prove herself to her siblings by creating inventions. However, her repeated failures from a young age, especially during critical moments when they need her, like the fight was on, when her family was about to be kidnapped and arrested, before the explosion, results in her feeling inferiority and incompetence. The explosion that kills her family cements her belief that she's a Jinx, because her family before died, and then her adopted family died again. And she was there for both times. So she believes she's a Jinx, because nothing good comes from her. So, identity versus role confusion. After being abandoned by Vi and taken in by Silco, Jinx struggles with her identity. She oscillates, I think I'm saying that right, I know what it means, I just can't pronounce nothing, between wanting to be loved by Vi and her former self, Powder, and embracing the chaotic, violent identity that Silco fosters in her as Jinx and loves her for. She struggles to be who she was in her youth, and who she is, or this version of her that she's become due to a toxic environment and bad influence. From pure and innocent and good to manic, depressed, and needing of help. Because both get her love, but only one gets her support. But the other's family. So she's constantly batting between getting love from her actual sister, her family, and being someone who accepts her and loves her as is, in her crazy and demented way. She struggles with this identity and who she is because of it. And that affects her personality, making her codependent on someone who doesn't take care of her well, and also manic because and with the schizophrenia, manic because of schizophrenia fostering between her old self and new self, the voices in her head. She's not well, and very mentally ill. And these things that she's went through fosters this unhealthy behavior that makes her personality a train wreck and a half. But that's Jinx. Dial it back from, I would say less death, but it's not, is Dean Winchester from Supernatural. Now this is a bit older, with a lot more to go into with 15 seasons, so, Background. Dean was raised in the hunting life by his father after a demon, Azael, however you pronounce his damn name, killed his mother. Dean's main role in the series is being the self-appointed guardian of Sam, his younger brother, and often going to extreme lengths to protect him regardless of his personal cost and welfare. His father often neglects his son and treats him more like an adult and subordinate. And after being kind, his father, John Winchester, can be described as emotionally abusive, physically abusive, obsessive, neglectful, and my favorite term, and overall, scum. Drunk scum. Growing up in this environment permanently damaged Dean to the point that in his life he never got a proper education due to constantly moving around because his father was a hunter chasing after a demon that killed his mother. Obsessive behavior. Having the best opportunities because he's constantly having to watch over his brother instead of taking care of himself. And being a kid, vital connections because he's constantly traveling, has no family except his dad who's not there, and his brother who he has to take care of. And overall, the life of any normal kid. Because his life is very messed up. Or about that. How does this affect him? Well, on the outside, he's fine. Unlike Jinx, who's manic and reckless up front, he's actually funny, mischievous, and in contrast to his younger brother, a little immature. He seems fine on the outside. Then you go deeper into his character, and you see he's not. He puts on a facade of perfectly fine because he has to. He's an anointed parent. He can't show he's unwell. He was raised as a soldier and a forced caretaker. He lies to himself that he's fine, but in multiple instances throughout the series we can see he's not. He hates his life. He even tries to run from it at some point in the series. He says things like, "I'm tired, Sam. I'm tired of this job, this life, this weight on my shoulders. Man, I'm tired of it." That's not someone who's happy in life. That's not someone who's doing great. That's someone who's struggling but having to put up a facade of okayness. Because if he's not strong, who's gonna be? He's never had no one to be strong for him. He has to be the strong one. And he can't leave the job because that's all he knows. His whole life he's raised as a hunter to the point that he thinks this is how his life's going to end, that he's going to go from birth to death as a hunter. He even says, "I know how my story is going to end. It's at the edge of a blade or the barrel of a gun." He has no hope for himself. And why would he in these conditions? Now, what psychosocial development applies to Dean with what I've mentioned? Autonomy versus shame and doubt. Dean's autonomy is stripped away as he's forced into a caretaker role for his younger brother, Sam, from a very young age. Instead of developing independence naturally, Dean is a burden with responsibilities that exceed his age capabilities. And he is. His dad was too obsessed chasing after the demon that killed his wife to notice his kid struggling. Instead of being a father, while he can seek revenge, he just ditches his kid. He puts all responsibility onto Dean of being a parent while he can go get revenge. He doesn't support Dean emotionally. He leaves him with the grief by himself. And he makes this young kid, maybe what we know, about 6 or 7, take over responsibilities as a parent. And he doesn't have the capabilities. He just lost his mother, now he's having to take care of a baby. Up all the way to college. He raises a kid by himself, basically. And he never gets to be a person on his own or learn. He doesn't have any other people in his life to help him. He is isolated and alone with this responsibility of a child. And that affects him because now he's only going to see himself as that. That he has to be okay, that he has to be a caretaker, that he has to be fine. Because that's what's expected of him. Because he has no autonomy of himself. He is just a tool. That's what he thinks. And so that's how he acts. Generative versus stagnation. Dean's purpose has always been protecting others, whether it be through hunting or his caretaking. He finds meaning in saving people and hunting monsters, believing it's his duty. However, because of this, he struggles with the fact his life is stagnant, that he'll never achieve a normal life due to what he's been taught his whole life. That he'll never have a chance to have a family of his own. And that sucks, because multiple times throughout the series, assuming you've watched this because it's been out for God knows how long, he wants a family. There's times he's literally ditched a woman who's loved him and a kid he could have had for this job. He doesn't think he's worthy of anything else in his life. That this is all he amounts to, and he struggles with the thought that, well, his brother can pursue college, a family, a life. He is forced to be his caretaker and be fine and be the provider. And that's all he'll ever be. That he'll never move on from this role. That's all he'll ever amount to in life. And he struggles with this all the way till his death. Because, like he predicted, his life ended at the blade or a gun. He never was able to escape a hunter. Overall, with all that's been said and done in this slideshow tonight, what we go through and how we learn from those experiences affect us just like Dean and Jinx, who went through arguably hell and back, pun intended there, and permanently marked them both in ways that change how they act and thought about themselves and the life around them. You can think back in your own life and see whether it be mistrust or trust, independence or codependency, connection, isolation, confidence, or shame that's now affected you. Were you supported? Or were you left to work it on your own? Were you able to find connection in others? Or were you abandoned? Does your life have opportunities, or do you feel stagnant? In your own life, through what you've been through, you can see your own personality changing. If you had a better life, you might have a better outlook, a better personality, a better, chirpier person. But if you've been through hell and back and never had a chance to grow, you might not be. All of what you go through in life affects who you are now. And whether it be good or bad, it is what it is, unless you change it. Because ultimately, you can go through hell, but if you don't change it through education and learning, you'll be stuck there. There's many things you can do for it, depending on what you've been through. You learn bad habits, you can unlearn them. You go through things, you can learn to cope. However you do, or what you go through in life, depends on you. Mostly. Some things are just life itself. But it's up to you to change how you act and depend on them. That's personality and education and development. How what you go through affects you. And it's all up to you. Because it's your life. And that's the end of this project. Thank you for bearing with me.